Hello, welcome to day 7 of the 15 Minutes to Quilt Challenge. Today I'm working on a project called Beautiful World. That's by Crabapple Hill Studios. It's basically a collection of embroideries. And these embroideries are put together into little quilts. They have batting inside them. They're really nice and soft. The original pattern attaches these to a canvas frame. But what I'm going to do, I'm thinking about piecing a background and attaching those to that. So basically it'll be a little quilt on top of a quilt. Today I'm going to use fabric that I use as a background fabric for the Improv Portraits Quilt. I'll put a link to that in the description box below in case you missed that video. I'm going to trace the pattern and start another embroidery and see how much we can get done in 15 minutes. Let's get started. Here's a close-up look of the sweet little embroideries. Some of them are properly stitched so that the edges don't show. And I left the backing raw here because they're just going to be attached to a quilt anyway, so I don't need to worry about that. And then others I zigzagged and made it more raw edge. And some of them I added some lace. And I added different kinds of ways to attach them. This one is attached with the machine, and it also has some hand stitching on the edges. And this one does too. Let's get started. The pattern for this quilt was provided by Crabapple Hill Studio, one at a time. And I was already late when I kept looking at it and trying to resist it. But eventually I decided that I couldn't resist it. I'm going to go ahead and start. And so I was just making some of these little stitcheries now and then, but then I got sidetracked with some other projects. So then it's a longer term project now than it should have been. So now it's a long term project for me. I'm going to use this brown embroidery floss. This is a voiceover, so I'm not going to be able to match all of the things that are happening on my screen. It's been a while since I've done any embroidery. I traced the patterns using my monitor again. Embroidery floss, and you can tell it's very obvious that I did a really sloppy job of doing that in this video. That's one of the things about having live videos in 15 minutes is you get to see all of the mistakes that I make. It's something that I'm trying to learn to do during this 15 minutes to quilt challenge, to relax and forgive myself for making these kinds of mistakes. So I'm going to leave it in and let you watch. I do know how to do it, and eventually I've done it in the past before where it did make more sense, but now I think I'm just going to give up and just cut it with the scissors. I don't need that much floss anyway. I was able to thread the needle pretty quickly though. So I guess there's something good to say about that. There was a knot at the end of the thread, which I'm going to leave and just cut off the end there. I'm using a Frixion pen to make the design, to trace the design onto the fabric. It's supposed to erase completely cleanly, and you can also erase it with heat. And this is the first time I've ever used it, so I'm hoping that it's going to work this time. I'm going to leave the bottom half for a different color. Because I was using a Frixion pen and I was using my monitor, I was trying to be careful not to press too hard on the fabric to make sure I don't mess up the monitor. And so it's hard to see some of the design for me as well as for you. But there's enough markings that I can be able to figure out where the basic shape is. That's a bird. The pattern that I'm making is a bird shape that's on top of a branch, and the branch is supposed to be made with the fly stitch. And the word fly is written by the bird, so that'll remind us that it's the fly stitch. I'm using the back stitch here to make this bird, to outline the bird, and it's working pretty well. It's very nice and relaxing to be able to make these stitches. I've made a list of all of my projects that are not finished. I have about 35 of them. I have about 35 of them. So I'm sure to have something to show you every day, although some of them are quilt tops are already finished, and I'm not going to be sandwiching that many quilts. But we'll figure out what we're going to do at that time, when we come to that. And it may seem like somebody who has 37 unfinished quilts, that seems like a really bad number. And in the past, I used to feel guilt about that, but I don't feel guilt about that anymore. I enjoy starting quilts, and because it's my hobby, I can just choose the parts that I like doing, and which is actually all of it. It's just there's so many temptations of new quilt projects to start. I haven't started any quilts in December, and I'm not planning on doing any, but I know for sure that I'll be starting one on January 1. So that's my incentive, to be able to not start any more this year. I have finished a lot of quilts in my lifetime. I've finished more than 135, so I do have more than 80% of the quilts that I have started, I have finished, and I've never abandoned any of my quilts, except for some that I only made a block or two just to test it out, and I didn't make any more, so I don't really count those as abandoned projects. They were just starts, and I might even go back and do more of those as well. But I'm not counting them on the list because I don't think I got far enough ahead to even count them as real projects. I think it's hard. There's some years where I tried to tell myself that I wouldn't start any new projects until I finished old ones. And I felt some guilt about having so many unfinished projects. But in the end, it's all about, enjoying the process and enjoying what you do. And there really isn't any point in having guilt about things that are not finished, as long as you're working on them and do what you like. It's part of the hobby. I'm curious to know though, what do you feel about unfinished quilts? Do you finish all the ones that you start? Have you abandoned any projects? Or do you work on one quilt at a time and take it all the way through to completion? I'm going to leave the rest of this bird alone so that I can add to it with a different color. So I'm going on to the legs here, I think. The pattern had specific colors to use, but I don't feel like going. The pattern had specific colors to use, but I like to choose my own colors and just pick out from whatever's convenient for me. I'm not really very choosy about what colors that I use, as long as it's the right general color. And it makes it look a little bit different from what the designer has, so it makes it a little bit more unique and a little bit more mine. Okay, I think I'm done with this color. I'm going to tie it off, but then I decide that I'm going to use it also for the eye. And I had a little problem with the French knot on this one. It's just going to be one stitch to make it really tiny because it's a small amount of space, but there was a problem, so I wound up just making it a straight stitch. There you go. I think it looks fine as a straight stitch. And now we can go ahead and move on to the next color after we tie the knot. Here's my list of quilts that I have started, and you can see there's 37 of them, but one of them is about cutting scraps and one of them is about cleaning the machine, so there's 35 in general. Lucky for me, this already is in strands of 2, so I won't have to separate them. Oh, actually, it's strand of 3, so I am separating one out, and it came out pretty easily. And this one was also relatively easy to thread. It's harder than I thought it was. I'm going to use the yellow on the underside of the belly of the bird here. And then I can use a fabric marker, or I'm going to use a fabric marker to add a little bit more color to the belly, which is what the designer had planned. And since I have a lot of yellow floss left, I'm going to go ahead and add another feather. I'm going to add a wing to the bird using the same fabric. I'm going to add a wing to the bird using the same floss, even though it's not very bright color. I think it's close on. I think it'll look good when you're looking at the bird close up. And then I'm going to go ahead and add some for the beak as well. My time is coming to a close, so I'm not going to be able to use another thread, but I'm going to be adding a branch to this, and the branch will have a fly stitch, and the words fly will be next to it on the bottom there. So thank you for watching this video. This video is a part of a series of videos that I'm doing that are showing you all of the quilts that I've made. I hope you sew along with me and let me know that what you're working on. And I'll do a drawing of all the people who have signed up on January 1. Thank you for watching. I appreciate all of your support. It's really fun to see what everybody else has been working on. Thank you for watching. Thank you for your support. I'll see you tomorrow.